Hey everybody, welcome back to our neck of the woods. So in Vlogmas day 4, it's all gonna be about the tractor. We're gonna be doing some maintenance. And then again, we're gonna be talking about if we're gonna sell it or not. All right, so I still am thinking about selling the tractor. Again, it's worth thousands and thousands of dollars, and it's just money that Aaron and I can use for the house build. Now, the majority of you guys said in one of the videos a few videos ago, don't sell it. But here's the thing. I still owe a few grand on it, and this thing's costing me about $200 a month, every month, to own this thing. So we're looking at about $2,400 a year is what I'm paying to have this thing here. And last year, since we didn't have a lot of stone movement around, not like anywhere close that we had when we first started building the house. In fact, I think I've had over 20 dump trucks come to the property and unload either stone or sand or gravel, etc. So this little thing has done its work. I mean, we're talking 500,000 pounds or more of stone or gravel delivered that this thing has moved around. So it has definitely done its job. But now that the outside of the house and the driveway pretty much are officially built, there's not a whole lot that we can do with this thing still. And again, that I've mentioned, one of the biggest problems is this thing without the loader and the arms and stuff and the mower deck, this thing weighs almost 1,700 pounds. With the mower deck, with the loader, and per Kubota's how-to on filling up the tires basically with liquid to give more balance, I think this thing weighs almost 2,400 pounds. So my high school years of a Honda Civic in its weight on these little skinny tires with these deep agricultural tires with those treads, all they do is tear up the yard. It's just not good for the property, like literally 6 months out of the year. So again, the fact that I only used this thing less than probably 12 times for the entire last 12 months, that's $2,400 kind of out the window. A skid steer is 10 times more powerful on its front end loader, that if I do have to go back and move that dirt next year and get that out of there finally, and kind of flatten out the property and do some more grading, etc. A skid steer is just 10 times the machine that this thing is. And yes, a skid steer will weigh 9,000 pounds, up to 12,000 pounds. But we can either get tired skid steers or we can get an actual track skid steer that will not rip up the yard. It's a lot more gentle, even though it weighs like 5 times as much. Being on a track, it doesn't tear the yard up as much. So it just makes more sense that I could go pay and rent a skid steer for about $200 a day, which would allow me to rent a skid steer 12 times during the entire year. And I will basically just match what I'm paying for this thing a year. So it just makes more sense to do the skid steer now, as opposed to in the past where I needed this day after day after day. The $1,200 or the $2,400 a year made more sense to own this thing than to actually rent a skid steer. But now the roles are kind of reversed. And again, even if we remove the bucket and we're trying to like mow the yard, I can't even mow the yard with this thing until like the middle of July, because everything, again, just gets rutted and dug out because the ground is just too soft. That little John Deere tractor that we got from my mom for free, that thing obviously can go around this property no problem. It's a smaller deck, it's a smaller unit, but it can get in between trees easier. And I can lift up the entire rear end by myself because it only weighs a couple 100 pounds. So we could sell this thing, we could get another riding lawnmower, and then Aaron and I could tackle actually mowing the grass 10 times easier and probably faster than trying to use this thing. Or if I was trying to use this and Aaron was trying to use the riding lawnmower herself. 2 little riding lawnmowers out here just make the world a lot easier. And we do have a little dump trailer on the back of that will hook up to like a little John Deere riding lawnmower. And that little dump trailer is probably as big or bigger than this entire bucket. So if we're cutting down a tree, you just take the riding lawnmower out there, load the dump trailer up with the wood, and then take it over the fireplace and dump it out or unload it. And again, it's just as easy and as fast as using this. But again, we're not turfing the yard up. So I think I'm still 100% on the mindset to sell this thing. Put probably, I think these things maybe go for around $15,000 to $16,000. And that's a good chunk of change to finish the drywall inside of the house, maybe get the mini splits installed, the HRV that I already talked about on Vlogmas day 3, I think it was. And yeah, it just makes more sense, right? Hopefully that explains it to you guys a little bit better, but that again, still is my mindset. That's a lot of money that we could use. And unfortunately, this big guy just does more harm than it's actually doing us good. All right, so I am at 200 hours on this thing, and that is actually the next service interval. So it went 50 hours, and then 200, then 400, and then it just keeps going up from there. I did ask Kubota today when I went and picked up some filters and oil and stuff. I'm like, you know, it's been 4 years since I've done service on this thing. Do you honestly think that you're only going by the hours and not actually by the year, like for the transmission oil and stuff? And he was pretty adamant that, no, it's okay. You can just go by the hour counter. I am going to change out the transmission filter, or actually, I think the PTO filter, whichever, I can't remember which way it goes. I went ahead and just got all 3. It's a $20 filter. You lose a little bit of oil when it comes out. But at least, again, because it's been 4 years, it just makes more sense to just change out as much as I can. But most of the fluids in this thing, besides the engine oil, actually don't even need replaced till I think like 400 hours or more than that. So it's crazy that it goes that long, but that's what Kubota says. But we're going to do as much of the things today on this thing as we can per the 200 hours and do a little bit more just to get this cleaned up and maybe sell it to the next person who may end up buying it. All right, real quick, first thing that I have to do, unfortunately, this brush guard, crash guard, whatever you want to call it, it looks like crap. There was a little like 3-inch tree that was loose in the ground that I cut down, probably like waist high, and I drove up on it, and I wanted to like push it over instead of having to actually dig it up. And well, this thing is like paper thin right here, and I literally just put it against the tree, pushed the gas, the tree went a little bit, but this bar and this bar just basically buckled like there was no tomorrow. Like this thing again was literally made of paper. I had no idea that it would bend like that, or I wouldn't have tried to push it over. But this obviously looks like crap. It looks like I was in a collision when I wasn't. I was just pushing on something. I can either replace this thing per Kubota for $113, or just unbolt it and get rid of it altogether. And then the next guy can either buy one if he wants to, or just leave it off. Because what are you really worried about? Are you really worried about crashing into something? I don't think that it's really that 100% needed. Somebody put these on tight. All right, well, that's off. It does weigh a lot. This is definitely thick over here, but you can just see how kind of wafer thin this part was and just how easily it bent just by pushing on a tree. So again, this is only $113, but I better take it off again just because it looks like crap. All right, next thing, maintenance-wise, this is not on the 200-mile service. It's just that time of year. We got to take the lower deck off. We got to turn it over. And we got to sharpen the blades up because I guarantee they're a little bit dinged up and nicked. If you've never taken off the mower deck before on yours, the first time you do it, getting it off is really not that hard. Getting it back on sucks because the PTO shaft, kind of like the drive shafts where there's a quick cut connector, Getting it back on there and lined up where there's like this spring-loaded ball that fits in a groove within the drive shaft, it takes forever to like get it to pop over. It should be completely easy and greased up, but it just doesn't work that easy. But to get all 3 of the hitch points off is pretty easy. All the Kubotas come with like these pins right here that are spring loaded, and when you pull them over, there's a notch that they can sit in, so that way they don't pop back in. And then this front one just has this arm right here that you pull on down, and then that separates from up there. Now, one thing that you have to remember to do, you can obviously adjust the height of your mower deck over here, basically from 1 through 8 as you drop it on down. But there's also this PTO or this lock mechanism right here that you can basically set the height. So if you were to drop that all the way to 1, that guy right there from 0 to 4 will only let it go down so far. So I basically have this thing adjusted all the way up to the highest point. Not because I don't want my grass cut super low, but when you're hitting like ruts and divots and stuff, the blades don't drop too low and like scrape off a piece of grass, and then it like doesn't look good at all. So again, just because of all the roots and trees and everything that we have out here, I kind of have to set this to the absolute highest point, and then I just drop that down to wherever it basically maxes out on that thing, as opposed to using the lever. All right, so once you lower it all the way to the ground, the deck is pretty much on the ground or on its wheels. You got 2 more spring-loaded things over here that you just pull and twist up back into its notch. Do that on each side. And then that separates the deck from there. So the only thing holding this on right now is the PTO shaft in the middle, which if we turn the tractor back on, we can raise it up and get it out of the way. All right, so hopefully you guys can see this. The only thing left is the PTO shaft here, basically on the axle going down to the mower deck. It's got this quick connect coupler right here that you just pull with both hands on each side. And then the shaft will, the larger shaft here will go over top of the smaller shaft that goes inside of it. And it'll actually shorten its length once you pop this off, and then everything will be completely disconnected. So it is really fast and easy to do. Again, the first time you use this quick connector though, it is kind of a pain in the butt to put it back on, but it is super easy to always get off. And that's that groove I'm talking about. You gotta get, looks like 2 metal spring-loaded balls that are inside of here. You've got to get this thing on far enough so they drop into this groove, and I don't know why, but again, the first time putting this back on is just a huge pain, or at least it was for me in this unit. All right, now the fun part, dragging this thing out that weighs an absolute ton and flipping it over. Now you can drive over this thing to get it on and off. That's what these ramps here are for. You basically just drive right up and over or reverse, either way. But this protects the mower deck, so you actually don't have to slide this thing. It's easier on concrete than it is out in the grass, but these ramps are available so that you don't have to do anything. All right, it's been a minute since I've had these off, so they look a little rusted, but this is a freaking 30mm nut, so hopefully it comes off easy, or I'm gonna have to wait for this thing to get more powered up, but these definitely need some sharpening, that is for sure. Nice. So it looks like 2 washers on this thing. This centering nut that has a spline drive on it, so that way this thing doesn't fall off and it really locks in. And then again, this 30mm top nut, but what a little bolt right there for such a large head. All right, I don't have a grinder for these, like a bench grinder, so I'm just gonna have to do it by hand, just giving it a little bit of a taper. But yeah, these things definitely have seen some rocks once or twice in their life, but they are still decently good at chopping up leaves and grass from what I can see. I'm not really complaining about anything, but they definitely could deserve all that ground down. Right, now that the blades are sharpened up, we can flip it back over, take these protective plates off. We can go ahead and get this cleaned up, but there's a few spots on here that all of these, there's a bunch of lube joints. So there's one right here for this blade, there's one right here for this one, there's one on the shaft itself so that this slides in and out, the grease fitting. There's one right here, another one under here. And I got to see if there's any more. But again, periodically, you do have to hit all of your grease fittings so everything spins nice and easy. So I got to look it up, but I think this is actually like it's a gear oil. I gotta look and see what the maintenance is, but I think this actually does have oil in it. So like this is the filler cap here because it's got a copper washer on it. That's probably a drain plug or a fill, but this doesn't get used enough that this oil in here would have been worn out, and it's very easy to spin. So everything is properly greased up and lubed, besides just one more to do over here. And the belt looks like it's in good shape and it's relatively new. This belt's only about a year old. I got a tree branch in here about a year ago and it snapped and cut the belt in half, so I had to get a new one. But let's move over to tractor. We'll hit some grease points on the front end loader and everything on the 3-point hitch in the rear, and then we'll go ahead and actually get started on the 200-hour maintenance on the tractor. Right, on the loader itself, I believe there are 12 total, 6 on each side. Obviously, every spot that moves. So you've got the in and out right here that goes up and down, the upper one, then one right here, and then one right here, and then one right here. And that's 6 on each side, obviously for everything that moves. But just make sure you clean them off real good, get all the old grease out, so that way it attracts less dirt. And hit them with some fresh grease and you're done. All right, so once the loader, all 12 spots are done, which FYI, that's not a 200-hour thing. It's every 10 hours of actual use. So not 10 hours on the tractor, but if you know that you're constantly doing stone and stuff like that, it's every 10 hours on all 12 of those. And then back here, there's really only 2 points, I think, and that's the 3-point hitches adjustment. So you've got one right here, and you've got one on this side. And that's obviously your up and down, and if you need like a left and a right. But it's just lubricating this entire thing right here. It's completely threaded. So just go ahead and hit those. Keep it rust free in case it sat outside and got rain on it. But again, it's not like this 3-point gets, for me at least, it's not like this thing gets thousands of hours of use up and down, or needing that adjustment. So actually, before we change the engine oil, I want to change out the first 2 filters with the engine cold. and with all the hydraulic system cold. So on the right side of the vehicle, back right about there, is the suction filter, or the filter for the entire hydraulic system. It's called a suction filter. It's the largest out of the 3 filters, and it is part number HH670-37712. This filter is not needed at the 200 hours. It's only part of the 50 hours. That thing doesn't need change till 400. But I hit 50 hours probably 4 years ago. So it's just the fact that it's been sitting for so long, I'm going on more of a time frame than the actual fluid. Now the fluid within the hydraulic system, that again also says it doesn't need changed until 400 hours, and we're only at 200. Some of the oil will leak out when you take this filter off. And again, we're just doing this filter because it's only a couple bucks, and it's just real easy to get rid of and to keep up more on a time scale as opposed to an hour scale. And then changing it out is just like every other filter you've ever changed in your life. Go ahead and put some oil around the seal right here, and then just screw it on, screw it off. And again, this thing will leak a lot, but that is okay. And then the other thing that we're gonna do is we're also gonna date, and we're gonna put the hours on here. So that way, again, if we don't hit 400 hours in the next, if I keep this thing in the next several years, we'll at least know the date, and then we can change it out every few years if need be. All right, I don't know what you guys use to take your filters off. Obviously they make caps that go on everything, but I pretty much have always used a nice big old thing of channel locks, just to grip it and rip it. And they seem to work in most places. And easy most of the time. Well, you can definitely hear that oil seal. Is probably a few years old. All right, and a lot of that fluid just leaked out. So not the worst thing in the world. Again, this is the hydraulic fluid. It's been in here for probably 5 years, I think, minus what fell out at the 50-hour mark. So it's not the end of the world for that to leak out, because we've got gallons to replace it, and that will give us fresh fluid throughout our hydraulic system. But that looked pretty darn clear to me. All right, so one more time, at 200 hours, that filter was not needed to be replaced. Neither does any of the hydraulic fluid, but we went ahead and did it because of the year time frame. So next filter up here in the rear is on the left-hand side of the vehicle, and it is that little guy right there, and this is for the transmission. This filter is needing to be replaced at 200 hours. And this is for the HST transmission, and it is HH660-36060. And this one should not leak as much fluid as we pull it off as the other one did. All right, now the only weird thing about the engine oil is the fact that it has two drain bolts. It's got this one here and it's got this one here because the drive shaft or the front steering rack goes in between them. We do have to pull the engine out, get it warmed up. Oil comes out a little bit easier, but we'll pull it outside, fire it up for 10 minutes, and then again, two drain bolts here. And then the filter is on the left side of the vehicle. right behind this cover here. And this is also a 200 hour service, but if you're like me with engine oil, to let the engine oil go for that long is kind of dumb. So I would honestly probably change it once a year. It's not that much money in oil. This thing only holds about 3.1 liters, and the filter's only like 12 bucks or something. So just go ahead and do it every year. Keep your oil a little bit safer. That way you're not gaining condensation and stuff in the oil, just like you would on any car. You never let your car oil run that long. So again, it just depends on if you're gonna hit 200 hours first or 150 once you do the first 50-hour service, or is your year time frame gonna come due first? And that's just my opinion. Oh, and before we pull this out, we can go ahead and refill the hydraulic fluid and the transmission fluid. It is the same oil. You can either use the Kubota HDT universal oil. Obviously it says trans and hydraulic, but then they also have a super. I bought this oil 4 years ago. It's unsealed. I only used a little bit of 1 gallon when I refilled this guy up. The guy today said I should have been using the super, but he looked back through the system and he says, oh, I see you purchased the universal before. It should be fine. But they're both Kubota oils. It's not gonna hurt anything. The only thing important when you refill the system is you wanna have this all the way down. So lower the level, let that fall all the way to the ground, and then you've got your dipstick here in the back, and you've got this rubber boot cap that pops off, which is your fill. Obviously this thing's gonna be pretty empty right now because we probably lost a good quart or two. But again, lower that all the way down, and then go ahead and check your dipstick level in between those 2 notches to actually see where you're at. And if you are at 400 hours and are doing a complete service, I think this thing holds 15 liters or whatever that is in gallons. Looks like 4 gallons even, or 15 liters. So that's probably why I bought 4 of these before, because I was getting ready to replace it down the road where we're at right now. But again, we're still not at 400 hours, so I'm not that worried about changing it out. We saw enough leak out that we can just go ahead and put some fresh in right now. Shocker, we're not even registering. And things like this, by the way, does say in the manual, should be a daily service thing. Like before you start going out and driving, you should obviously be checking all of your fluids and making sure that they're properly filled up at the correct level. Alright, so engine oil is no different than any other engine oil. Go ahead and loosen your dipstick, loosen or take off your oil filter cap. And that way, when we take off those 2 9/16 bolts on the oil pan, all the oil just rushes right out and we'll get a good flow and change. This is a really bad setup. Having this hose right here smash the filter. And then again, all these other hoses around it. Trying to get this thing on here and off. What a pain in the butt. All right, so this only takes 3.1 liters, and we got a gallon or 3.78 liters, so it's not a lot to fill back up. But it's easy enough to fill up as long as you got a funnel here. And make sure you fire it back up. So that way, once again, a sideways filter gets full of engine oil. All right, so that's it for the fluids. We've replaced the rear, what fell out, and we put almost a gallon in, and that's a total of 4 gallons back there. So we replaced a little bit early, 25%. So not a bad thing, but we went above and beyond on that suction hydraulic filter, and it looks like the rest of the stuff is just starting to check stuff. So we're checking the engine starting system that we just did because it fired up. We know that we're good. Greasing, we pretty much went around and got everything. Now they want us to check the wheel bolt torque specs, the battery condition, and actually clean the air element. So that's all just real easy looking around the stuff and checking everything. But let me get my torque wrench, we'll check the lugs, and then we'll pull out the air element and we'll actually blow it and clean it. There's a big average on these, like on a spread, but the front is about 60 and the rear is about 130. And that's an 11/16, and the rear is 7/8. One little correction there, the front wheel specs, they are 58 to 68 on their torque specs, so 60 was fine, but actually in this particular manual, it only says 107 to 110 foot-pounds, so obviously none of those tightened up, even though I was using the 130 spec, but 107 to 110 is all that is needed for the rear. All right, battery's tight and cleaned up. That front little radiator protector is cleaned up. The air filter actually looks really good. On the inside, there's absolutely nothing, but there's just a little bit of dust on this outside element here. But then there's also a micro filter in there. So that thing goes in there and clips on the inside of the air intake. And then the outer filter goes on the outside, and it looks like that filter element has an inner layer and an outer layer. So there's 3 layers of protection before anything actually gets down into the motor, but this all looks really clean. All right, so the only other things to really clean is the filter element. I don't have to clean my filter because I changed it last year. I got some bad diesel fuel, and in fact, every time I go in and fill up diesel fuel, in the bottom of those yellow cans, there is always like metal flakes and stuff. So last year, I actually replaced the entire fuel element, which is just this filter right here that screws on as it comes down from a line from the gas tank. And then I had to take it to a buddy who actually had a suction thing at the time, which I do have now. I've got that brake bleeder that I could stick down into the fuel tank. We sucked it all out, and I think he might have even taken the fuel tank off or just stuck a big hose in there and sucked all the metal fragments out that come, I'm assuming, from the diesel gas tanks at the gas station. But he completely cleaned all that out, cleaned the filter element, replaced the filter element, so we don't have to worry about that. And then it wants you to look at the fan belt and adjust it, the brake and adjust it, check the radiator hoses, check the fuel lines, the air intake line, which we just did. And then it says it wants you to adjust toe in. Now I'm not gonna adjust the toe in. I can already tell the vehicle drives straight as an arrow. There's no pull or anything because I can go out on the street here and fly down it and there was no issues at all. So I'm not gonna touch the toe. I'm relatively confident that that's okay. We've already checked everything else. I know the brakes work. I guess I could adjust them if they needed it, but it's just the amount of travel that you have, and this thing basically doesn't move at all. It's rock solid because I hardly ever use the brakes. So that doesn't need adjusted. The fan belt, I'm not sure how to adjust actually. I'd have to look to see if there is an adjuster on here, but just by touching the fan belt, it is super tight. I wouldn't want to tighten that thing up any more than what it is right now. So we're good there, and I think we're good everywhere else. The only other thing, when it says check the radiator hoses, the only thing that I'm noticing is we're pretty much down on coolant right here on the overflow. So I've got some distilled water. I'm just gonna fill that back up almost to the max line here. And then I think we should be done for our 200-mile service. And one more thing you want to check just in your maintenance here, this yellow plug right here. This is the oil for like the entire like front transaxle or whatever you want to call it. It just pulls out, goes back in. You can check the level in there too. But that also does not need replaced until about 400 miles. But that's just part of your daily maintenance too that you don't want to forget about. All right, everybody, there you go. Kind of full winter maintenance on the Kubota tractor here. Again, will we replace that brush guard one day? I don't know. But the other big question is, do we replace the hood? I had a little accident not too long ago where a log fell out, put a big old dent here and a big old dent here and smashed the ornament off. And that hood to replace is a little over $700. Plus you need to buy the stickers and everything. So by the time you're done, you're looking at almost $1,000. So I may end up seeing what a body shop may charge me, that we can take this hood off, pound these dents out, kind of like a paintless dent repair, maybe give it a wash and polish it up. And then I did go ahead and purchase the $13 hood ornament there to get that replaced. But once we do that, this thing will be back to like kind of pristine condition. We've got everything greased up. We did the 200-mile service. The engine oil's changed. All the filters are changed, even though we went above and beyond. We got our blades sharpened up and everything greased up in the mower. And we went ahead and kind of went around and did a once through. So that's your 200-mile service on the Kubota. Again, probably up for sale. And this can finish vlog day number 4. So hope you guys enjoyed another one. I'm gonna get the cleaning up here and figure out what we're gonna do for Vlogmas day number 5.